Hi everyone, it's Adam with Milo's Restoration, and I apologize for the long delay on the videos. I know it's been about a month, but I've got a furniture flipping video today for you about how I'm going to take this piece of kind of chipboard, particle board furniture, and I'm going to do like a black lacquer on it. And I've really been wanting to try black lacquer, so this is the subject that I found for that. So I cleaned this piece with, there are these things called gator wipes, I'm pretty sure. And basically, they're just pre-packaged, like kind of pre-moistened wipes. And they're made for paint prep. You have to make sure that you get the brand that's for paint prep because the other one has aloe vera in it. And I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty sure aloe vera is like a contaminant for paint. But they're pretty good at degreasing. And yeah, I like to use them. Pretty convenient. You don't have to, you know, drag out a bunch of chemicals and stuff like that. You just use the wipes, rinse them off, and then toss them away. So I'll typically fill after I've done a little bit of priming, just because I feel like I get better adhesion. I used a two-part filler. I didn't show it, but before you lacquer or use any kind of vinyl primer, you definitely want to use some kind of like hybrid vinyl or some kind of hybrid vinyl sealer over the areas where you fill with any kind of like two-part epoxy or anything like that because it's going to react with your lacquer. And I've had pieces where I totally completely got done with the job and then I saw the area where I'd filled at and realized that it basically completely ruined it. So, I mean, that's just, kind of sad to get all the way through a piece and then realize that. So, definitely, if you're going to do any filling with a glazing putty or any kind of automotive product like that, you need to prime with something other than a vinyl sealer after. It can be a lot of different things, but it needs to be something other than a vinyl sealer before you apply your vinyl sealer for your lacquer, I mean. So when it comes for sanding, I like to keep things pretty simple, 220, 240, something like that, pretty much for just kind of like us adhesion purposes. And really, if I'm trying to flatten things out when I'm sanding, I'll use 240 or 220. And generally speaking, on most substrates, that's going to work. Obviously, if you're working on a solid wood piece, it might take something a little bit more than that. But for most of this kind of particle board stuff, bumps in laminate, bumps in veneer, you can pretty much straighten everything out with 220. So I don't really know what's in that can, honestly. I think it's some kind of vinyl sealer. And like I said, this video was made a long time ago. Well, I know it's some kind of vinyl sealer. It's probably Mohawks. And I originally wanted to use a whitish color. But basically, I had some of the white, so I just decided to use it up. And I'm going to be putting a black vinyl sealer over the top of this. So that spray gun is a Graco Edge 2, and it's made to be used with a turbine. You can use it with a cap spray or whatever brand turbine you have. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend anything under 10 psi, but I do like the Graco turbine itself too. It's a great turbine. It works very well, and really, you can kind of see in this area where I'm spraying at. The reason that I do prefer these guns sometimes over the traditional or conventional spray guns, and really, I mean, even HVLP spray guns, is that they put a lot more material on for the amount of overspray that they get, which is nice because you're allowed to kind of put a lot more material before it dries and flashes off, and you get like a good wet coat of lacquer or vinyl sealer or whatever you're spraying. That's one reason I really do like it a lot, as opposed to a typical air compressor setup. But the problem with it is that it also wastes a little bit of material, and the atomizing power is not quite as much as a air compressor spray gun. When I'm sanding in between coats of vinyl sealer, typically I'll just use like it's a fine pad from Surf Prep, or a very fine sometimes, depending on how much I need to flatten out. But I just do a quick sanding, try to get everything flat. Vinyl sealer is pretty soft, it's easy to sand, so you just need to be careful. And next, I mixed up a cup of the blackberry. So the color is, I think, Sherwin-Williams blackberry, and it's in a gloss lacquer. Well, it's going to be a gloss lacquer, but I'm putting on a coat of vinyl sealer, and this is going to be the color of the actual piece right here. So basically, it's like a black with a little bit of white in it. It's really pretty color to me. So I've kind of become accustomed to using like a 1.6 or sometimes a 1.8 for this spray gun. I spray around 20 psi, probably 18 psi at my regulator. And, I thin it down. I add a pretty good amount of lacquer thinner as well as lacquer retarder, usually somewhere in the range of 20 to 40%. Sometimes I'll go as high as 40, depending on just if the conditions are really extreme. But, it really just depends, honestly. So I got to give my critiques of products too. Can't just do too much good talking about everything because obviously that's not the case on all products. And really, that's not the case for any product. All products have their downsides. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the downsides of the Mohawk vinyl sealer right now. One, it's extremely finicky in the sense that it cannot be used with any other water-based coatings. It's become kind of popular in the kitchen and cabinet refinishing industry to take a random vinyl sealer, spray it because somebody told him it was better than BIN shellac. And while that's true, you can't do that with just any vinyl sealer. It has to be done with, like a certain, basically a primer that's made for refinishing. And the intentions of the Mohawk vinyl sealer is not really refinishing. It's really made to be top coated with a lacquer, and that's really all you can do with it. I wouldn't recommend using anything other than a lacquer on top of this vinyl sealer. And the other thing about this vinyl sealer is that it does tend to react with filling products, like I said earlier. So if you do, when I say filling products, I mean like Bondo, glazing, any of that kind of stuff, it'll react with it, and you'll see it through the finished product at the end of the job. So you need a barrier coat between it, but really that's it. Everything else can be kind of fixed, and the Mohawk Vinyl Sealer is great too because of the fact that it's allowed to be tinted so dark, and it's allowed to be tinted really any color. And it can be tinted accurately any color, which is pretty uncommon. So that's a good thing about it. So you can see when this product is manipulated right and it's sprayed in a really controlled environment, it does look really good. It gets a really glossy look to it, and keep in mind this is just vinyl sealer, so technically this is just primer. It's not even lacquer. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's all about the prep work and manipulating the material to make it do what you want it to do. So obviously, for kind of liability reasons, I can't like encourage you to do anything or not do something, but I think that thinning the material to the point where it works for your environment, as well as adding the right amount of retarder to where it works for your environment, is crucial. So this is my lacquer, and when it comes to lacquer, I don't really have any kind of commitment type to one brand. I use Sherwin Williams typically. I have a really good Sherwin Williams rep, so I try to buy from them whenever I can, and they're really helpful. So, that's just specific to my local branch, though. Sometimes other Sherwin Williams are not very helpful, um, but mine is. And I buy their high build clear, so that comes from them, and it's a pretty good product. I like it a lot. Also, Exalta makes a lacquer called a Merriam. That's their line. It's a pre-catalyzed lacquer. It comes in gloss, all the sheens that Sherwin-Williams lacquer does. And also Mohawk, obviously, the same brand that I use the vinyl sealer in. You can buy lacquer from them. The only reason that I'm not crazy about Mohawk's pre-catalyzed lacquer is because the gloss is technically only 80 sheen, which is like 10 degrees of shine less than Sherwin Williams and Exalta. Exalta and Sherwin Williams both are rated at 90 plus. So yeah, I mean, if you really want to get that kind of fine paints of Europe high gloss style look without kind of all the fine paints of Europe work, it's a good way to go. A lot of the times though, you will have to cut and buff these pieces if you want to get to that same level of shine. So after 3 coats of lacquer, I moved on to wallpapering the insides of these drawers. They definitely needed it. So this is just kind of how I do it. Typically I pretty much always use a vinyl wallpaper just because I find that they're the toughest and they're going to be the best for something like a drawer liner. So I usually take the back of the drawer and I'll size it up and I'll cut it with obviously a little bit of extra on it, and then I'll apply my paste. I'm pretty sure that I think it's called Roman 880. I think that's like the big one that most people use, and it's just a water-based wallpaper. It's got a lot of slip to it, which means that it's easy to manipulate the piece of wallpaper while it's still on the wall, or in this particular case in the drawer. And you want to apply it to a sealed surface. You want to use your sealer of choice before you apply Roman 880, and make sure you let it dry. And then after that, you can apply this on a sealed surface. So this surface is sealed, and I'm applying wallpaper to the back and the kind of bottom of the drawer there. So basically what I do is I just kind of fit it into place, trying not to wrinkle it any, but of course I'll wrinkle it, I'm sure, at some point. And I'll just kind of work it into the corners, starting in the middle, and I'll make some relief cuts whenever I get close to the edges to make sure that I don't crease the paper. With a more sensitive paper doing what I was doing earlier, you probably would have already creased it and it probably would have been ruined. But this is a pretty thick vinyl, and it's really hard to kind of hurt this particular vinyl. It's just not really very sensitive. So I'll use my wallpaper smoother on it after I've kind of made some relief cuts on it to straighten everything out and to make sure I get all the air pockets and all of the glue out. And I try to get as little glue as possible on the wallpaper, even if it doesn't hurt it. It's just good practice to learn how to be clean whenever you're working with wallpaper, and to not kind of torque it and cause those issues, because even if you're working with a forgiving wallpaper, if you ever want to move on and work with a more difficult paper, for instance grass cloth, it's going to be hard if you are kind of used to making a mess. Yeah, so after you're done, just make sure that you wipe the residual glue off and with a damp towel, and clean all your tools off. So I originally put these kind of like, I don't know how you say it, like agate, agate, I don't know. Anyway, I put those kind of hardware on there. They're kind of made of half of a piece of rock and some kind of gold flake on the outside of them. And I think it was kind of a good idea, but the hardware being black and the other piece being black, it just really didn't bring it out very much. So I switched it to a brass hardware later. So here's the finished piece, and I think it came out really well. It's got that really glossy look to it that is pretty popular right now. And yeah, I mean, thank you. If you've enjoyed this video, and if you can subscribe, it definitely helps me a lot. And please continue to watch and continue to kind of check out my channel and see what else we have going on.